Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the Standing Committee on Finance, Operations, and Governance, held tonight, December 16th. And I first ask that the clerk call the roll.
Vice Chair Biancario, Member Johnson.
Here.
Member Roy.
Here.
Chairperson McCullough.
Here. So we have several items on the agenda tonight, but we are going to start in the interest of a virtual participant with item GB 4-90, which is to review the report on applying agreed upon procedures for the Student Activity Fund testing for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. So I will pass it over to Mr. Allen.
Thank you, and to the chair. So the district has engaged the audit firm of Clifton Larson Allen for many years to conduct testing of our student activity accounts. DESE requirements only require the accounts to be audited on an every 3-year basis, but we found that best practice has been for us to have the accounts audited every year. And so each year that the audits are complete, we ask the auditors to come in and present to the school committee their findings and recommendations. And so with us tonight is Matt Hunt, who I believe you've all met before. He's joining us virtually to review both the FY22 and FY23 student activity account reviews.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. As he mentioned, I'm here to discuss 2 years worth of reports, FY22 and FY23. Just to give a little bit more background, Brian covered it, Mr. Allen covered a lot in terms of background, but just for additional context for people who may not know, I think it's pretty well known. Most schools within Worcester Public Schools operate what we call student activity funds. It's essentially funds raised by students for the sole purpose of the students' benefit, things such as yearbook, drama club, things of that nature. And so the procedures that we perform, it's technically not an audit, it's called agreed upon procedures. It's very similar to an audit. Essentially, we perform, it sounds just like it's described, agreed upon procedures. We come up with a list of procedures, they're agreed upon by Worcester Public Schools, and it's sort of a set hit list of things that really, I think, sort of cover most of student activity funds in terms of bank reconciliations, testing revenues, testing expenses, etc. So in terms of the report, again, it's 2 years worth of reports, and you'll see from the reports they're quite lengthy in terms of they cover each school, they list out all the procedures and all the findings by school. Instead of going over the reports in that way, I felt like the most efficient and best way to cover the reports is to actually just give an overview of the types of findings that are in these reports. And if you need detail in terms of which findings apply to which school, you can go through the report and see the breakdown by school. But in terms of FY22, we'll start with that report. There's really 5 categories of findings that you'll find within the report. One particular finding is one procedure that we do is we compare the bank balances that are set aside for these student activity funds, and we want to make sure that the sum of those bank balances reconciles to the balances in all the different clubs, yearbook, drama, etc. Those two should match. You should have the same amount in your bank accounts as you do in your listing of funds and their balances. And what we found is those, for FY22, important to note just for that year, we found that those reconciliations weren't being prepared. But sort of jumping ahead to FY23, those particular findings, those reconciliation findings, virtually all went away except for one school with a very minor finding. So that's one very major improvement that was schools made from FY22 to FY23 with those reconciliations. Back to FY22, in the series of findings, there are 3 distinct set of findings that you'll see on bank reconciliations. One of them is it's best practice to try to do all your monthly bank reconciliations within 30 days to month end. We did find some instances in which that was not the case. Doesn't mean the reconciliations weren't prepared, they just weren't prepared best practice within 30 days. Some of the reconciliations, or I think maybe just one, didn't have a list. It had outstanding checks as a reconciling item, but it was not supported by a detailed listing. And then also with reconciliations, we think it's best practice for the preparer of the reconciliations and the reviewer of the reconciliations to both sign the reconciliations and date them. It leaves an audit trail. We did find some instances in which either the signatures weren't all there, or sometimes the signatures were there but they weren't dated, etc. And again, these are just best practice findings. And then lastly, what you'll see in FY22 is we do revenue and expense testing. We did find some instances with expense testing where we like to see supporting documentation that makes it very clear what the expense pertains to in terms of which club or activity. There were a couple of instances in which we didn't have the backup for that, and there were just a couple other instances where the supporting documentation for expenses was a little bit lacking. But then jumping ahead to FY23, again, as I mentioned earlier, those reconciliations of your bank accounts to your club balances, that was a major improvement from FY22 to FY23. Again, all those findings went away except for one school, the very small variance. The other thing that you'll notice from FY22 to FY23 is the number of findings related to having the appropriate supporting documentation for expenses. Those findings were much less in FY23 versus FY22. So I do think it's important to point out some of those improvements that were made from one fiscal year to the next. And what I'd say overall, and Mr. Allen did bring this up, I do think the WPS does a good job of managing their student activity funds. And I do think it's commendable that despite the fact that the requirement is to only have these procedures be done every 3 years, that they are done every year. And we're actually going to be doing the FY24 student activity funds in Q1 of 2025. So I do think it's commendable that these procedures are done every year. So that's essentially my summation of the reports, and be happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Oh, sorry, Mr. Allen.
No, just maybe to give some additional context and clarity, just to be clear. So student activity accounts are managed at the school level, not by the business office. So in this case, we actually help support the schools in each of these transactions, but the principal oversees the account, and it's usually a staff member, a teacher, or another assistant principal, or something that's the treasurer of the student activity account. And so when Mr. Hunt describes signatures not necessarily be in place, that's the requirement that the principal sign all the documents with the treasurer, the supporting documentation, the bills. We certainly try to support them in completing their reports and reconciliations. We'll actually be conducting some additional training for schools after these findings, even though there's been improvement, but there's always turnover either in principals or the staff, the student activity treasurer, which is a stipend position. So we'll be refreshing our training program and delivering that to the folks over the next 6 months or so.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for that clarification. I forget sometimes that some of these things are more common to some of us than others and know how those operate. So I think that is a good clarification that it is done at the school level and it's supported by the business office. I mean, looking at the findings, I think to what Mr. Hunt actually shared as well, a lot of the things were minimal in nature, but things that can be rectified easily. And from 22 to 23, we saw a significant reconciliation of some of those items. The only question I will ask through administration is, are we going to start using the Workday system with these types of things moving forward?
Through the chair, so that's something we're still exploring. We're using a program called SFO, School Funds Online. So we have not made a determination. So with it online, it does give us a little more access and visibility to the transactions at the school level. It used to be Quicken and so forth, but now but we would be looking for a different platform, whether it's Workday or some other module. We think Workday is going to be compatible, but we're not there yet.
Sure, no problem. No, that's great. I just know from my other end of things, those types of systems can be very helpful, because then it's the kind of almost like a foolproof and fail-safe, you know, you have to have a receipt for this or you have to have that. So no, I think I don't have any other questions. So I appreciate the report, and I also really appreciate that we are doing it yearly, because I think, you know, even though 3 years is the suggestion, that with things like turnover or just, you know, making sure things don't go too far if they're off track, that we're on top of them. So thank you so much. And I will open it up to Member Johnson.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions through the chair to administration in regards to the recommendations that need to be followed up from fiscal year 22 to next year. Who does that? Who follows up with?
So the business office will follow up with the individual schools to reinforce what the recommendations and next steps will be.
And second question, so does the school see this report at all, so that they're aware of kind of what the findings were?
Through the chair, we will be sending these recommendations to each of the schools. We literally just got them in the last couple of weeks, so we will be sending them off to the schools for their individual reports.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Member Roy?
I just have one observation to make, and I think it's great that you're doing it yearly through the chair and not waiting for the 3 years in case there is a discrepancy. So I do commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Hunt. I appreciate your time. So then I will ask the clerk, the motion is to approve and file, and I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Vice Chair Biancaria, Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Roy,
Yes.
Chairperson McCullough.
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to ask, there's nobody online, is there? Are there anyone online? I just want to make sure I didn't open it up to public comment, but I didn't see anyone on there. No? Okay. All right, just making sure. Oh, attendee?
Yeah, she didn't raise her hand.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just making sure. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. So then the next item we will be taking up is GB 4-38 from Member Biancaria. It was to request that the administration provide a report in reference to funding and necessary arrangements to provide therapy dogs at school sites. So we had previously talked about this item several times, and our final ask on it was just to go to South High and the 365Z Foundation to find out what in fact it did cost for the dog, and I'll just open up to administration with any comments on that.
To the chair, so you're correct. So we did contact the 365Z Foundation. They gave us an estimate of $8,000 it would cost per dog, and then the annual cost of food, medical, veterinary, and grooming costs, the normal ongoing cost for a pet. So they did give us the upfront cost would be about $8,000 per dog.
Thank you. So I think, as we've had these conversations, especially with budget scenarios, that conversation has been that, certainly if another school were interested in it, finding a community partner to support that endeavor. And, maybe down the road someday, if we have a very robust budget, that's something we can be looking at ourselves. But those community partnerships, I think, is where we'll see any additional growth of that, or simply, even if it's an in-house person who's willing to do it, something like that. But I don't have any questions on the item. I will move it over to Member Johnson.
No questions?
Member Roy?
No questions?
Then the motion is to approve and file. If the clerk could call the roll.
Vice Chair Biancaria, Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Roy,
Yes.
Chairperson McCullough.
Yes. The next item we have is GB 3-259. This was filed by Member Kamara. It was to develop a policy around culture and belonging for students, family, and educators. I know this is something that has been worked on significantly over the past 3 years, few years, not 3 years, few years. And we've done quite a lot of work in these areas with our family and community engagement. I know we've seen a lot of growth in both like the regular CPAC, but also special ed PAC, different groups. Again, I'll open it up to administration for any other information they'd want to provide before we vote to file.
To the chair, again, you said most of what's contained in the report. Over the last 3 years, the superintendent and her team, particularly around the creation of the Family Community Engagement Group, has really engaged students, families, and educators through teacher advisory groups, student advisory groups, all the groups that you had mentioned. We continue to support, we actively participate with the Worcester Equity Roundtable. So plenty of opportunities and entry points for family, students, and community members to participate in issues regarding the Worcester Public Schools.
Thank you. I'd really like to highlight that so many of these things are significant and time consuming, and we have so many wonderful people working on them, from our Family and Community Engagement Department, from the climate and culture roles, from our Q teams, and certainly, so many more opportunities for there to be feedback given throughout the district, not only with our students when we have the superintendent advisory groups, when now we've expanded to the middle school level, the roundtables for educators, the teacher advisory group that so many are participating on, and just a lot of opportunities for families to be a part of those things. So I think, hopefully if people are listening, they know that these opportunities are out there and they're seeing them posted on the website, because it is something we want to continue to encourage, is for people to feel like they're a part of what's going on here in the Worcester Public Schools, and that they belong regardless of what category they fall under, that they have a voice. So I just want to thank the administration for all the work that they've done on that. So I'll open it up to Member Johnson.
No questions?
Member Roy?
No questions?
All right, then the motion is to approve and file. If the clerk could call the roll.
Vice Chair Biancaria, Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Roy,
Yes.
Chairperson McCullough.
Yes. So the next item we have are actually two items together, GB 4-69 and GB 3-256. The first item was filed by Member O'Connell Novick in 2023 to end the addition of artificial turf fields on Worcester Public Schools property. and then by member mailman in 2024 to request information related to the new turf field for Doherty High School. In the response, please indicate answers to the following questions. Has the turf been bought yet? Certainly cost was a factor in the field that was chosen. What are the differences in specifications based on cost? What and when are the next turf field replacements scheduled for Worcester Public Schools? The NFL is currently rejecting turf fields for safety reasons. Are there alternatives? As our city goal is to build green, do we have concerns about petrochemical fields? Has the Mass Association of School Superintendents weighed in on turf fields? So those are the two items together, and I will open it up to administration.
Through the chair. So this is really just an update to all of those questions but we wanted to inform the school committee of the action steps that the administration plans to take. Chiefly is to create an athletic turf committee. We understand there may be environmental and safety issues, and on the other hand, there are maintenance and budget constraints and concerns as well. So we've appointed facilities members, our environmental health and safety staff, and then representatives from each of the high schools, including the athletic department and assistant athletic director, to look at all of those factors, to look at if there's alternatives, if new products may have less environmental issues in the future that we may understand. What are the maintenance issues? What are the budget issues? And then over the course of the next several months, look at the issues and bring a recommendation back to the school committee about long-term athletic fields. Prior to this item, the Doherty Field has already been purchased through the construction budget controlled by the city. The next school is Burncoat High, and we're nowhere near a decision point on that one at this point. And so whatever recommendations coming out will impact Burncoat High, and then the replacement of any of the athletic fields at Foley Stadium, South High, and Doherty in the future.
Thank you. I have no questions at this time. Member Johnson?
I have no questions.
Member Roy?
No questions.
All right, so then we're going to approve and file, because we'll anticipate that we will get an update down the road as a separate item with this committee that will be coming forward. Clerk, if the clerk could call the roll, please.
Vice Chair Biancaria, Member Johnson?
Yes.
Member Roy?
Yes.
Chairperson McCullough?
Yes. And last but not least, GB 4-67, to approve a change in the policy EFD school nutrition program charge policy to align with the approved student handbook and DESI requirements. We have actually voted on this several times already in different ways. So this is just to approve and file for the actual policy manual. So unless the administration has anything to add.
All set.
Okay, so then I will open it up to Member Johnson,
No questions.
Member Roy,
No questions.
and I will ask the clerk to call the roll to approve and file.
Vice Chair Biancaria, Member Johnson?
Yes.
Member Roy?
Yes.
Chairperson McCullough?
Yes. And so now we will call to adjourn the meeting. I ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Vice Chair Biancaria, Member Johnson?
Yes.
Member Roy?
Yes.
Chairperson McCullough?
Yes. Thank you all so much.